Have you ever wondered why, despite your best efforts to move on, certain emotions keep resurfacing? Why do you still feel the weight of unresolved feelings, even though you thought you had let go? If you've ever convinced yourself that emotional detachment was the key to freedom, only to find yourself feeling distant, disconnected, and even lonelier, this video is for you. In this video, we're diving deep into the truth behind emotional detachment and the real cost it comes with. We'll explore how detachment, while seemingly protective, actually keeps us from experiencing true emotional strength, connection, and the freedom to feel without fear. You'll learn why detaching from emotions and relationships may not be as empowering as it seems, and how this habit may be preventing you from living a fuller, more connected life. If you've ever wondered why you push people away or feel numb to the highs and lows of life, stick around. By the end, you'll understand how emotional detachment doesn't shield you from pain, it simply delays healing. This video will help you begin the process of reconnecting with your emotions, understanding the real power of vulnerability, and learning how to move forward with strength and authenticity. Don't miss out on the steps to truly heal and live life to its fullest. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. At first, detachment feels like the ultimate form of control. It feels like a shield that protects you from the pain, the vulnerability, and the uncertainty of life. You convince yourself that you've found a way to rise above emotions, that by numbing yourself, you are somehow resilient. The hurt, the scars of your past, no longer seem to sting as they once did. You tell yourself that you are no longer that person who was once so deeply affected, so consumed by what happened. But here's the painful truth. You haven't truly freed yourself at all. All you've done is distance yourself from the raw, beautiful truth of who you are. You've separated from the emotions that once defined you, the ones that shaped your very being. The past doesn't just vanish. It hides, it lingers, it creeps into the very fabric of your choices. It lives in the hesitation you feel before letting someone in the walls you keep up to protect yourself from the possibility of real connection. You keep others at arm's length, convincing yourself you don't need anyone, and that being alone is somehow easier. But deep down, buried under the weight of all that detachment, you crave connection more than anything. You long for the touch, the understanding, the raw, unguarded moments that you refuse to let yourself experience. Then, without any warning, the past comes rushing back. It could be something as small as a familiar song, a scent in the air, or an image that flashes in your mind. And at that moment, all those walls you've so carefully built, the walls that were meant to keep you safe, begin to crumble. A single reminder, a fleeting moment, and suddenly, the calm detachment you fought so hard to hold on to is shattered. You can't help but wonder, if you were truly detached, if you were truly over it all, why does this one small thing have the power to unravel everything you thought you had control over? The truth is, that attachment isn't healing. It's postponement. It's a lie you tell yourself that you've moved on, that you've let go. But in reality, the emotions you suppress don't fade away. They hide in the shadows, waiting. They change shape, they evolve, but they never disappear. You push people away, not because you don't care, but because allowing yourself to care feels dangerous. You avoid intimacy, not because you don't want it, but because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like the greatest risk of all. Carl Jung warned us that what remains unconscious will control our lives, and we will call it fate. You may think you've moved past the pain, that you've buried it so deep that it no longer affects you. But what if, in reality, you've just buried it so well that it's still quietly, subtly controlling you from beneath the surface? What if your emotional detachment is not a sign of strength, but a deep-rooted fear, hiding behind the illusion of control? The shadow of your past never forgets. The longer you try to outrun it, the more power it gains. The question is, how much longer are you going to let that shadow decide your life for you? There's a strange kind of silence that follows emotional detachment. It's not peaceful, it's hollow, empty. It makes even the most joyful moments feel muted, as though you're watching life unfold from a distance, but not part of it. You don't hurt the way you used to, but you also don't feel the rush of joy, the excitement of real connection, or the warmth that comes with being fully present with someone. Life keeps moving forward, but you feel like you're stuck, untouched, uninvolved. Detached, yes, but also disconnected from everything that once made life feel so rich and full. This wasn't always the case. There was once a time when emotions felt vivid, when every experience left a lasting mark, when love and loss weren't just abstract ideas or philosophical concepts, they were raw forces that shaped who you were and who you became. You could feel everything so deeply: the joy, the heartache, the laughter, the tears. Now, it all feels distant, like something you read about in a book or hear others talk about, but never really experience yourself. Conversations feel scripted, interactions feel mechanical, and the connections that once felt rich and meaningful now seem shallow and empty. The people around you notice. They might not say it outright, but they can see the distance in your eyes, the walls you've built so high. They call you independent, self-sufficient, the one who doesn't get attached easily. Maybe that's true. Maybe you've perfected the art of keeping the world at arm's length, convincing yourself that you're safer that way. Detachment convinces you that you're in control. It whispers in your ear that by shutting down, you're protecting yourself from the risk of disappointment, rejection, and heartbreak. It feels like a strategy for survival, a way to shield yourself from the vulnerability of loving and living fully. But here's the catch. It doesn't warn you about the price you'll pay. You don't just avoid the pain, you avoid everything that makes life beautiful. You avoid deep connection, the kind of relationship that fills your soul. You avoid the rawness of truly experiencing life, of feeling the highs and the lows. You even avoid the feeling of truly being seen, loved, and accepted for who you are. The further you distance yourself, the more unfamiliar and uncomfortable intimacy becomes. You start to mistake solitude for peace, thinking that being alone is the same as being content. You confuse emotional numbness with wisdom, convincing yourself that not feeling is a sign of strength. You convince yourself that the ability to walk away without looking back is some kind of victory. But is it strength? Or is it just fear dressed up as resilience? The avoidance of pain is not the same thing as healing. It's like pressing pause on emotions, hoping they'll go away, wishing that by ignoring them, they'll eventually disappear. But emotions don't disappear. They don't vanish into thin air. They burrow deep within you, sinking into your heart, your mind, your soul. And one day, when you least expect it, they will resurface stronger, more intense, and more overwhelming than ever. They will remind you of what you tried to bury, of what you tried to outrun, and they will come back in ways that will catch you completely off guard. The truth is that detachment only postpones the inevitable. It might seem like a haven, but it's not a solution. It's just a temporary escape from the very emotions that make you human. The cost of detachment is never immediate. It's not like a sudden blow that leaves you reeling or a sharp pain that you can't ignore. No, detachment is slow. It's quiet. It's almost imperceptible at first. But then, one day, you look around and realize that something important is missing. You're not just disconnected from others, you've become disconnected from yourself. The very essence of who you are has slowly slipped away without you even realizing it. Somewhere along the way, emotional detachment shifted from being just a response to pain, a temporary shield, to something more permanent, something that feels like a way of life. It wasn't a decision you made consciously, not at first. It was a gradual shift, a quiet adaptation to all the disappointments, the betrayals, and moments when vulnerability felt like a weakness. You adapted to the world's coldness. Over time, you stopped expecting, stopped hoping, and slowly, you stopped feeling as much. It became easier to withdraw, to pull away before anything or anyone could hurt you. And before you knew it, that distance became part of who you are. You became unshaken, self-sufficient, someone who was almost impossible to break. But what if this version of yourself, this emotionally guarded, self-reliant person, isn't as free as you think? What if what you're calling strength is just avoidance dressed up as resilience? The mind has a sneaky way of convincing you that survival is the same as healing, that if you're not feeling the pain, then you must be whole. But Carl Jung would argue otherwise. Detachment, he would say, isn't the absence of emotion, it's the suppression of it. And whatever you suppress doesn't simply disappear. It doesn't just vanish into thin air, it waits. It hides in the corners of your mind, biding its time, until the moment comes when it will resurface in ways you least expect. Jung believed that the unconscious mind is always at work shaping our behaviors, influencing our relationships, and even guiding the way we view ourselves. The things you refuse to confront, the emotions you try to bury, they don't go away. They become part of your shadow, the hidden part of your psyche, where all your unprocessed emotions, fears, and wounds are locked away. You may think you've let go, that you've moved on, but the truth is, nothing that deeply affects you ever truly leaves you. It simply finds new ways to surface. It comes out in subtle ways, in quiet moments when you least expect it, pulling at the edges of your carefully crafted detachment. It resurfaces in your relationships, in your choices, in your interactions, reminding you that you can't outrun what's been buried. The more you try to suppress it, the more it will demand to be seen until you can no longer deny its presence. That's why certain patterns keep repeating in your life. You notice the same emotional distance in every relationship, that familiar feeling of exhaustion whenever someone tries to get too close. It's like you're constantly fighting against the pull of intimacy, instinctively pushing people away before they have the chance to hurt you before they can leave. And you convince yourself that these behaviors are just preferences, that you're making logical choices to protect yourself. But what if they're not choices at all? What if their reflexes are so deeply ingrained in your unconscious that you don't even recognize them as defense mechanisms, as survival tactics that have quietly shaped your life for so long? The shadow self isn't just the dark parts of you, the things you don't like, or the mistakes you've made. It's also the parts you've rejected, the emotions you've denied, the vulnerabilities you've buried so deep that you no longer acknowledge their existence. It's that version of you that once craved closeness, the person who felt deeply, the one who trusted without hesitation. Over time, as detachment takes hold and becomes your shield, that version of you begins to fade into the background of your consciousness. In its place, you become someone who avoids connection rather than seeking it, someone who dismisses others before they can even get too close, someone who convinces themselves that being alone is safer, that they are better off without the messy complexities of human connection. But the unconscious doesn't stay hidden forever. No matter how much you try to bury it, it doesn't simply disappear. It leaks out in subtle, quiet ways through that unexplained loneliness that seems to follow you, through the difficulty in forming lasting bonds with others, through a persistent, nagging feeling that something is missing, even when you can't quite put your finger on what it is. The longer you ignore it, the more it controls your choices, making decisions for you without your conscious awareness. It shapes the way you interact with the world, guiding you into situations and relationships that reinforce your emotional detachment, all while you remain unaware of the force that is silently driving your actions. Jung warned us that until we confront our unconscious patterns, they will control every aspect of our lives, and we will simply call it fate. We'll wonder why relationships never seem to work out, why love feels exhausting, why it feels like nothing ever reaches you the way it once did. You may even find yourself asking why the joy you once felt in the company of others is no longer there, why the spark of connection feels dull, like it's forever out of reach. But here's the truth. Detachment was never the goal. It wasn't about building walls or pushing people away. It was about finding wholeness, about reclaiming the fullness of your emotional life. And the real question is, after all this time, will you allow yourself to find it again? Will you allow yourself to break free from the isolation you've built and step back into the world with all its beauty and mess, with the risks and the rewards that come with true, deep connection? If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. At first, emotional detachment feels like control. It feels like the ultimate defense against life's chaos, a way to protect yourself from the storm of emotions that once left you feeling vulnerable and exposed. It feels like power, the ability to walk away without hesitation, to remain unaffected, to avoid the messiness of human emotions and the pain that sometimes comes with it. You've learned to cut ties without looking back, to guard yourself against disappointment, and to stop expecting too much from anyone, because expecting more than what you give is just setting yourself up for heartache, right? But what if this control that you've carefully cultivated is nothing more than an illusion? What if, instead of protecting you, the detachment you've mastered is keeping you trapped in a cycle of self-imposed isolation? What if, by avoiding the hurt, you've also been avoiding the very thing that could bring you healing, true connection, emotional intimacy, and the freedom to feel everything deeply without fear? Emotional detachment isn't just a habit you've developed over time. It's a system, a carefully constructed pattern that your mind has reinforced over and over again, all in an attempt to prevent pain. And like any system built on fear, it doesn't just serve a purpose, it traps you. It holds you in place, convincing you that you're safe, that you've figured it out, that you've mastered the art of not caring. The first trap is the false sense of power. You convince yourself that by needing nothing and no one, you've become invincible, that emotional distance is a form of self-preservation. You tell yourself you don't rely on anyone because you've transcended that need. You think you're self-sufficient, that you've found the secret to emotional independence, and that you don't need the deep emotional bonds that once made you feel vulnerable and exposed. But what happens when you no longer know how to need anyone at all? What happens when you've built such high walls around yourself that you can't even allow yourself to be cared for, to be supported, or to be vulnerable? There's a fine line between self-sufficiency and isolation, between emotional strength and emotional numbness. When you cut yourself off from others to protect yourself from the risk of pain, you also cut yourself off from the joy of truly connecting with others, from the deep, soul-nourishing bonds that can only form when you allow yourself to be seen for who you truly are, when you let yourself love and be loved in return. The real question is, what do you lose in the process? What are you truly protecting yourself from, and at what cost? The longer you maintain this emotional detachment, the further you distance yourself from the very essence of what it means to be human, to feel, to connect, to hurt, and to heal. You may think you're protecting yourself, but in reality, you're locking away parts of yourself that long to be free. The more you avoid vulnerability, the more you distance yourself from others, the more your heart becomes hardened, and the more you lose the ability to experience life in all its fullness. And the greatest trap of all is that you might not even realize what's happening until it's too late, until the years have passed, and you look around and realize that the connections you once craved, the love you once felt, have slipped through your fingers like sand, and you're left wondering what went wrong. strength and avoidance, once the line between them is crossed, it becomes incredibly easy to mistake loneliness for freedom. You tell yourself that you are in control, that you've chosen this solitude as a form of protection, as a way to shield yourself from the messiness of human emotions. But over time, this isolation becomes a cage, and the very walls you built to keep yourself safe begin to trap you. Then, the cycle of self-sabotage starts to take hold. You convince yourself that people always leave, that love always fades, that deep connections are too fragile and unreliable to trust. So, to protect yourself from the inevitable pain, you push them away first. You pull back when you should lean in, withholding affection when you should give it. You shut down before anyone can even get close enough to hurt you. In doing so, you create the very outcome you feared. You prove to yourself again and again that closeness isn't worth it, and that letting anyone in only leads to disappointment. But the real question is this: is it that love fails you? Or have you spent all these years ensuring that it never gets close enough to succeed? The longer you remain detached, the more difficult it becomes to access your emotions at all. This is the erosion of emotional depth, the slow and steady disappearance of what once made you feel so alive. You don't just avoid pain, you avoid feeling, period. The high moments, the rush of excitement, the joy of new experiences don't feel as high anymore. The warmth of connection doesn't feel as fulfilling. There's a hollowness beneath the surface, an emptiness that you can't quite put your finger on, but one that you can't ignore either. You tell yourself that life is steady now, that things are simpler this way, that by detaching, you've found peace. But deep down, something is missing. The things that once excited you no longer have the same effect. Over time, you forget what it was like to feel truly alive, to experience the world with all of your heart and soul. But the greatest trap of all is the inability to recognize what's missing. When you've spent so long convincing yourself that you don't need love, don't need closeness, and don't need connection, you stop seeing their absence as a loss. You accept the emptiness as your new normal, telling yourself that this is peace, that this is the way life is supposed to be. You adapt, you function, you survive. But by the time you realize that something is missing, you've already forgotten how to let it back in. The walls you've built are so thick, so high, that you've forgotten what it feels like to let anyone close enough to matter. You've conditioned yourself to believe that this distance, this numbness, is a form of strength. But is it strength, or is it just fear disguised as control? Jung warned that repression doesn't free us. It only buries the truth deeper, deeper into the shadow of our unconscious, where it waits. You can tell yourself you don't care. You can convince yourself that you don't need anyone and that you're better off alone. But if that were truly the case, why does something still feel incomplete? Why does the silence feel more like isolation than peace? Why does solitude sometimes feel like a cold weight, a burden you didn't choose, rather than the comfort you thought you'd find? Emotional detachment was supposed to protect you. It was supposed to eliminate the risk of heartbreak, the unpredictability of relationships, and the exhausting roller coaster of emotional highs and lows. And, in many ways, it did. It protected you from the pain, but it also took something precious with it: the ability to feel deeply connected, to feel truly seen, to know the joy and the vulnerability of being fully understood. What you once gained by detaching from the world, you now see as a hollow victory. The protection came at a steep price, and it's only now, looking back, that you can see what you've lost. It's easy to convince yourself that this is just the way you are, that you've simply grown to prefer being on your own, and that the chaos of other people and their emotions only brings complications and frustration. After all, it feels safer, right? Less messy. But then, there are those fleeting moments, those quiet, undeniable moments, when the silence feels heavier than it should, when the absence of connection doesn't feel like strength, but like something slipping further and further away from you. You realize, in that split second, that something vital is missing. Something that once gave you warmth, joy, and belonging. And in that moment, you wonder, how much longer can you keep convincing yourself that being alone is better than being vulnerable? Carl Jung believed that the parts of ourselves we reject create a divide between the conscious and unconscious mind. The more we detach from our emotions, the more we separate ourselves from what we truly need. But the truth is, our need for connection doesn't just disappear. It doesn't vanish because we choose not to face it. Instead, it transforms. It morphs into something quieter, more subtle. Instead of reaching out for closeness, you distract yourself. You keep busy, telling yourself that it's enough to just keep going. You overanalyze, constantly processing every detail of every interaction, trying to control something, anything. You build a life that's structured, efficient, and controlled, anything to avoid sitting alone with the uncomfortable truth that, beneath the surface, loneliness is quietly growing, finding new ways to settle in the spaces where love and vulnerability used to live freely. The problem is that emotional detachment rewires how you experience connection. The deep warmth of a heartfelt conversation, the safety of being emotionally supported, the pure feeling of being truly understood, these things become unfamiliar, almost foreign to you. They feel strange, even unsettling. And when something becomes unfamiliar, it naturally begins to feel uncomfortable. So, you avoid it. You convince yourself that you don't need it, that it's a luxury, a weakness. You start to find flaws in others before they have the chance to get too close. You keep your relationships shallow, held at a distance, at a place that feels manageable and safe. But even with all these precautions, despite all the self-imposed distance, something inside you still longs for more. A deeper connection, a chance to feel seen, heard, and truly known. The truth is that loneliness doesn't just come from being physically alone. It comes from feeling disconnected. Even when you're surrounded by people, you can have 100 acquaintances, but still feel like no one knows you. You can be admired, respected, and even loved, but if you don't allow yourself to be fully seen, if you don't open yourself up enough to truly connect, none of it will ever feel real. That's the true cost of detachment. It keeps you from the pain of loss, yes, but it also keeps you from experiencing the beautiful, raw power of closeness. It shields you from rejection, but at the cost of deep, meaningful connections that could fill your life with joy. It guarantees you'll never get hurt, but in doing so, it ensures that you'll never truly feel at home with anyone else. You'll be left wondering why, despite all the self-protection, you still feel so alone. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. So, is it really that you don't need anyone, or have you simply convinced yourself that needing someone is a risk you're no longer willing to take? Emotional detachment may seem like a shield, keeping you safe from the pain of disappointment and hurt, but it also keeps you isolated, sand-separated from the very things that once made life meaningful. The walls you've carefully built to protect yourself have done their job, they've kept the hurt out, but now they stand between you and everything you truly long for. The connections, the intimacy, the deep, soul-stirring bonds that once filled your life with purpose, those are now out of reach, held at bay by the fortress you've constructed around your heart. Loneliness, once a faint whisper, is no longer subtle. It's loud, it's undeniable, and somewhere deep inside you, you know that staying detached is no longer enough. You've survived, but you haven't truly lived. But if detachment has been your armor for so long, how do you begin to take it off? How do you begin to let go of the walls you've built up brick by brick over the years? Breaking free from emotional detachment isn't about forcing yourself to feel everything all at once. It's not about tearing down every defense in a single reckless moment. The mind doesn't work that way. What's been constructed over the years can't simply be undone in an instant. Healing starts with recognition, the willingness to see what you've been hiding, to acknowledge what you've been avoiding. Carl Jung believed that the key to wholeness is integrating the parts of ourselves we've rejected or ignored. He said that what remains hidden will always control us. But what is acknowledged, explored, and understood can finally be released, allowing us to regain control of our own lives. Reconnecting with emotions after years of detachment is disorienting and unsettling. It feels unnatural at first, as if something deep within you resists it. The old habits, the ones that kept you emotionally distant and protected, pull you back toward that place of isolation, reminding you how much easier it is to stay guarded. But the discomfort of vulnerability, the unease you feel when you open yourself up, isn't a sign to retreat. It's a sign that something inside of you is waking up again. It's a signal that the walls you've built are starting to crack, and your true self is longing to reconnect. The small moments of presence, allowing yourself to sit with your emotions instead of numbing them, and choosing to express rather than suppress, are the first steps toward rebuilding what you've lost over the years. Slowly, piece by piece, you start to reclaim the parts of yourself that you thought were gone forever. For so long, detachment has dictated the terms of your relationships, making sure that nothing gets too deep, nothing too risky. You've kept yourself safe by keeping others at a distance, and now, noticing these patterns and becoming aware of the way detachment has shaped your interactions is the first step toward undoing them. The instinct to withdraw when someone gets too close, the knee-jerk reaction to shut down when emotions feel overwhelming, these are remnants of a past self, a version of you that believed distance was the only way to stay safe. But awareness disrupts the cycle. The moment you recognize the urge to detach, you reclaim the ability to choose differently. You begin to break free from the old patterns and make room for the vulnerability and connection you once feared. Healing detachment is not about rejecting independence. It's about rediscovering connection, but without the suffocating fear that comes with vulnerability. It's about realizing that needing others doesn't make you weak, that being vulnerable isn't a threat, and that feeling your emotions doesn't mean you'll lose control. True emotional strength is learning to exist in the delicate space between extremes, where you are not consumed by emotion, but neither are you emotionally absent. The goal was never to drown in feelings, but to learn how to let them flow through you, how to experience them fully, without resistance. This delicate balance of embracing emotions without being overwhelmed is where true emotional resilience lies. There was a version of you that existed before detachment took over. A version of you that trusted without hesitation, that loved without always measuring the risk of loss, that felt deeply without filtering every emotion through fear. That part of you is still there. It was never erased, just buried, hidden away beneath the layers of emotional armor you've built over time. And now, for the first time in a long time, you have the chance to reconnect with that version of yourself. The instinct to detach has been with you for so long that it feels second nature now. The thought of lowering your guard, of feeling deeply again, feels unfamiliar, even unsettling. After all, detachment once served as your shield, your protection, keeping you from breaking, keeping you safe from the pain. But what if emotional strength isn't about shutting down? What if it's not about closing off to the world and never allowing anyone to get too close? What if real strength is about learning to stand in the storm, to weather the emotional chaos without running away from it? There is a kind of strength in holding yourself together, in keeping your emotions at bay so they don't overwhelm you. But this isn't the same as avoiding emotion altogether. True emotional strength isn't built on avoidance or suppression. It's built on resilience, not the kind of resilience that forces you to suffer in silence, but the kind that allows you to experience life in all its rawness, without fear of being consumed by it. Somewhere along the way, detachment convinced you that needing nothing was the ultimate freedom, that the safest way to live was to remain untouched, unaffected, and impossible to hurt. But freedom isn't found in isolation. It's found in the ability to connect, to care deeply without losing yourself, and to trust without constantly preparing for the inevitable loss. Emotional strength isn't about being untouchable. It's about knowing that you can be touched, you can be vulnerable, and remain whole. Letting go of detachment doesn't mean making yourself vulnerable to everything and everyone. It doesn't mean opening yourself to be hurt at every turn. What it means is learning when to let yourself feel, when to allow yourself to care, and when to trust that not every emotion is a threat. It's about understanding that connection is not weakness, and that guarding yourself from pain should never come at the cost of guarding yourself from life. There's a difference between self-protection and emotional isolation, and recognizing that difference is the first step toward healing. Maybe you're not ready to tear down all the walls just yet. That's okay. Healing isn't about rushing to undo everything all at once. It's about recognizing that there's more to life than avoiding what hurts. Maybe today, you simply acknowledge that strength doesn't mean shutting yourself off from the world. Maybe tomorrow you allow yourself to feel something without labeling it as dangerous or risky. One step at a time, you'll learn that true emotional strength isn't about not feeling. It's about feeling deeply and knowing, no matter what comes next, that you'll be okay. As we wrap up today's discussion, take a moment to reflect on everything we've covered. What have you learned about emotional detachment and how it's been shaping your relationships, your connections, and even your sense of self? Have you realized that true emotional strength isn't about shutting down, but about learning to feel deeply and without fear? Perhaps you've discovered that true freedom comes from vulnerability, not isolation. I'd love to hear from you. Comment below with one thing you've learned today and how you plan to bring it into practice in your life. What step are you ready to take towards reconnecting with your emotions and breaking free from detachment? Your thoughts and experiences might just inspire others who are on the same journey. And if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please leave a comment, like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate your support, and we can't wait to bring you more content that helps you live a fuller, more connected life. Thanks for watching, and take care on your journey to healing and self-discovery.